And welcome back after all this insight about the stock markets. Now, the next session, when the challenged become the challengers. Very excited to see you all back here. Remember to ask any question or any comment you want to have through the chat. And this session is going to be moderated by Charlotte Crosswell, FinTech Non-Executive Director. And I am very excited to hear what these neobanks have in stock. Welcome, Charlotte.
Great, thank you, Olga, and great to see you. So a fascinating panel I have to moderate today, and what a better way for two people to talk about the bigger theme of how do we get the next 10 years right. So I'd like to welcome Luvleen Sidhu from BM Technologies and Sujata Bhatia from Monzo.
Hi, thank you for having us.
Yeah, great, well, great to see you. Now, for anyone who knows, it's us in London normally wouldn't be dressed in short sleeves. So Sujata and I are actually based in London, where it is stifling hot. And of course, we don't have air conditioning, so you'll have to bear with us. And Luvleen probably is a little bit more comfortable on the other side of the Atlantic. But it's been great to have you here. Now, obviously, we've got a global audience joining us today. So I think nothing better maybe just to have a couple of minutes on what actually you do, what Monzo does, BM Technologies do, just in case there's someone out there that isn't aware. So Luvleen, perhaps I can start with you.
Sure. Thanks so much for having us, and I'm excited to be here. So my name is Luvleen Sidhu, and I am the CEO of BM Technologies. We are one of the largest digital banking platforms in the country today. We are also one of the first, if not the first, neobanking fintech to go public in 2021. And so we are now publicly traded on the New York Stock Exchange. We have over 2 million account holders today. And we really have a mission of how do we utilize technology to create a better banking experience for millions of Americans around transparency, affordability, more consumer-friendly products, et cetera, to really provide a much more financially empowering banking experience. And today, our growth, our profitability is really driven by a B2B2C approach and a banking as a service strategy. So what that allows us to do is that we acquire customers at high volume and at low cost. So today we're acquiring customers at less than $10. And so we're able to have this B2B2C approach by enabling non-banks to actually get into the banking business as well. And that's really the business that we're in. And this is just hopefully the beginning for us. So thanks again for having us, and happy to be here.
Great, thank you, Luvleen. And I have to say congratulations on your IPO. I think you glossed over that monumental moment in very easily, but not many people get there, as we all know, and not many women get there who are founders. So congratulations to you. Sujata, perhaps I can pass to you.
Sure, and let me echo that. Congratulations, Luvleen. So I'm Sujata Bhatia. I'm the COO of Monzo Bank in the UK. We are an app-only licensed UK bank. Our mission is to make money work for everyone. We are 6 years old. We've grown pretty rapidly to serve 5 million customers in the UK now. And we've really built new ways of banking that make it easier for people to see and manage their day-to-day payments and allow for visibility and control over their finances. Things like instant spending notifications, real-time budget updates, the ability to easily manage day-to-day finances like splitting bills all from the app. We offer retail current accounts, overdrafts, loans, and we also serve over 80,000 business banking customers. We're known for our customer-centric products. We have a net promoter score of 70. We top the CMA, the UK banking rankings for overall service quality, and we're one of the UK's most consistently recommended brands. We're number 2, I think, at the moment. And I think just the fun fact, I think we can say that we're the first bank in the UK to become a verb. So if you are in the UK and you've been out to a pub or a restaurant of late as they've opened up, you'll hear people say like Monzo me or I'll Monzo you, and it's a pretty standard catchphrase, and we're just getting started.
Thank you, Sujata. And we shouldn't forget the hot coral card that everyone knows you by. So you
That's
can
right.
always recognize a Monzo customer because you see the hot coral card being flashed out very proudly.
Although we now have holographic blue and white metal premium as well.
Which you probably should be selling more. So it's great to have you both here. And I think really fascinating that we can look at this from the US versus UK perspective, because it's quite different, the way that we've seen neobanking change. And how it's been challenged. And obviously UK, much smaller customer market, so market penetration goes up in terms of percentage quite quickly. And the US, obviously, you have a huge customer base that you can go after, Luvleen. So today we're going to really talk about that digital platform, how it provides services in banking, lending, advice, investing, and crypto. And the point of our session is, are the neobanks going to overtake the classical banks in the next 5 to 10 years? I'd love to hear your views. Please do put questions to the panelists, and we'll hopefully have about 10 minutes at the end to take some of those if they come through. So let's maybe just take a moment on challenger banks. Rewind to last financial crisis, the 2008, before we got to the pandemic, and really the start of the challenger bank arena. So just talk about US versus UK, and whether both of you think the pace of change is now accelerating post-COVID, and is this going to be trigger for the next evolution in fintech? Perhaps Sujata, I can start with you on that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think change was happening anyway, but absolutely the last year has accelerated that in marked ways. I think for digital businesses in general, the pandemic was a bit of a tailwind in terms of user adoption, and then particularly in payments and banking. Banks shut their branches, people had to go online. Online spending grew exponentially. I think more people adopted new modes of digital payments than ever before. In the UK, as you know, where contactless at point of sale was 1 out of 2 payments was contactless before the pandemic, that's accelerated even more and it's now become the default. So I think we're seeing an acceleration, and I don't think there's any going back. For our business, the pandemic was maybe counterintuitively a time of innovation and execution. We launched 3 big substantial products during that lockdown year, and our customer uptake was really rapid. So we now have over 200,000 customers using those new products before we were even out of lockdown. And by the tail end of the pandemic, we had 30% more revenue than we had pre-COVID, and 25% of that was from new revenue streams. So I think it's just an example of the acceleration that we've seen across the sector.
And I mean, is that the same for you? Have you seen a distinct change over the last 12 months since you founded BM Technologies, or what's your perception on that?
Yeah, I echo what Sujata said. I mean, across the board, there's been acceleration of digital strategies. Like my mom would be confused how to order things on Amazon, and now she's whipping it up with Amazon, Instacart, you name it. So across the board, I'm looking really fuzzy. I hope you guys can see me. But across the board, there's an acceleration of digitization. And as Sujata said, banking is no different. We've seen exponential growth in our own portfolio. So our new business segment has seen 665% plus year-over-year growth in deposits. We've seen about 150% year-over-year growth in our spend. We helped distribute, over 400 million in stimulus payments that came into our accounts, and overall about $500 million in disbursements that were part of the CARES stimulus funds for our schools and partners into students' hands. And so there's just been a lot of liquidity, and a lot of that is coming to the banks. And last year was our first profitable year, and the first half of this year were 10 times year-over-year growth in EBITDA. So user growth, more comfort with using neo-challenger banks, more engagement, more retention. We're seeing it across the board.
Great. And what do you think would you put down as the key to your success so far? Is it just the market was ready for change? What was different about BM Technologies?
I mean, for us, firstly, you have to be in the business of being customer centric, right? Do you want to come? What pain point are you solving? And being very clear about that. In the U.S., at least, it was very clear that 1/3 of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. And you can rattle off 1 billion other stats, and these same Americans are being charged $34 billion a year in overdraft fees. That's just one problem of many that exists in terms of just table stakes experience from a banking standpoint that Americans are lacking. And so there was a very clear mission, and there was a very clear pain point that we were going after. That being said, you can have a great product, but that doesn't mean anything if you can't acquire customers. And so what I think has led to our success is that not only do we have a robust product that meets the pain points that the consumers are dealing with, but we've also developed a unique customer acquisition strategy, which is a B2B2C approach, at least for us, where we leverage the entrenched customer bases of the companies, the higher education institutions, et cetera, that we work with, so that we can bring down our CAC to very competitively positioned. And that is what leads to not only our model being strong in terms of the consumer standpoint, but profitable as well, which is very unique in the challenger banking space.
Yeah. And Sujata, obviously, B2C for Monzo, 5 million customers, which is no mean feat. And I remember when you were at 4 million, it didn't seem that long ago. What would you say is different to that? And how challenging has that been?
Yeah, we're definitely B2C. So, I mean, right now, for that 5 million customers that we've grown to, just to give you a sense, more than 90% of that is organic growth, so word of mouth. So, I guess zero CAC. I've only been at Monzo for a year, so I joined, near the beginning of the pandemic last year. And so I had the opportunity to admire the company from afar initially. And I think I really echo what Luvleen said, but what I had the opportunity to see with Monzo is that the company's heritage has really been one of co-creation with customers. The early days, Charlotte, people would come into the Shoreditch office and just experiment with products and provide feedback. And the company and the teams have really stayed connected with those customers through Monzo community, through social, a continuous approach to user research. And so we're constantly co-creating and creating a really nimble approach to addressing customer needs and, to Luvleen's point, pain points. I think really the thing is, this isn't a sector that's known for being customer centric. There's lots of big companies sitting on back books and kind of banking on customer inertia as a business model. And so when you have the right company culture and it drives that focus on customer outcomes and products that solve a problem, you get to a lot of customer first innovation. So for us, that was things like freeze your card, which is now like an industry standard, splitting bills with your friends, but also things that aren't necessarily, commercially created. So gambling block, which is a self-exclusion tool that lets customers block payments to gambling companies and give them control over their addictions. I think when you really start with your customer in mind, it creates a snowball effect. And I think now, I talked about Net Promoter Score, it's 5 times the industry average. And now 1 out of every 20 faster payments in the UK is with Monzo. So, customers are our biggest advocate.
And on that note, with the topic that we're supposed to be addressing today on staying ahead, are you therefore confident that you can stay ahead? Do you think the high street banks are going to catch up? And also, how do you continue to evolve and innovate?
Yeah, I think I don't often worry about staying ahead. I mean, I think the sectoral change is clear. And so anyone who's going to succeed in this space is going to become digital first and customer centric. I think, sure, the incumbent financial institutions are looking to catch up, either with their core proposition or by launching their own challenger banks. I think that's a huge compliment to the sector. When an incumbent launches a tool that we've pioneered or spins out a digital offering, that's a compliment. It can only be positive for customers. I think the challenge that incumbents can have is that they have siloed ways of working, many of them, that are product-centric, not customer-centric, and a huge backbook to protect. And that means a large part of your organization is consumed with looking inwards and backwards, and innovation can become like a side point on the agenda that always has to be balanced with competing priorities and opportunity costs. And obviously, there's probably a wider question about legacy technology and legacy mindsets, that classic October release kind of date. That's something that's anathema in a challenger org. We are constantly releasing, constantly being nimble, constantly talking to customers, and continually forward-looking. And nobody's sitting on their laurels. So it's not something that I worry about a lot.
Yeah. And let's talk about scaling, because obviously a lot of people, that's when they fail, is the scaling phase. And both of you have represent companies that obviously have done an incredible job of scaling. Luvleen, what would you say was one of the biggest issues in getting you ready and up to that profitability milestone and the IPO?
Scaling we have to be prepared for. I think that a lot of challenger banks have experimented with building their own cores or using new cores, which is really, you could assume, sort of the backbone of the banking infrastructure. And so when we launched, for example, with T-Mobile, the T-Mobile Money checking account, overnight, we had to be able to offer a national bank. There was no, pilot, and we're going to start with a small amount. Once you roll this out to T-Mobile customers, it's 120 million Americans that this offering goes out to. So we actually went with a very, you could say, sort of legacy core, and it was a decision that we made at the time because of the robustness, where we didn't have to worry. We view the core as sort of the ledger that's just as the checks and balances, and really is not where the innovation lies. So we set up our bank that we could do on day one a million customers doing 1 billion transactions at the same time. And we really built that infrastructure and did that performance testing up front to make sure that we were prepared to be able to scale on a national level on day one.
And coming back to you, it's just the same question. We talk a lot about talent acquisition. We're in a global race for talent. It's so hard. I mean, is that something you've experienced at Monzo? How do you acquire your talent?
Yeah, I mean, I think of it as like moving to the next phase, not necessarily a challenge, but hiring is always top of the agenda. So you'll see like at the top of the company, we brought in talent at the C-suite level where people have experience to manage larger and more complex organizations. So that was the mandate I came in under, our general counsel, our new chief risk officer. But we're doing that at all levels of the business. And I think the key is that you balance that with kind of the nimble approach of a startup. You don't lose that heritage, and you make sure people at all levels of the organization stay empowered, that you don't get, embedded in a hierarchy. Some of the things that we look at is, as you're hiring and you're in hypergrowth, great onboarding processes to make sure people are connected to the values of the organization and the heritage, and you're not losing that culture. We run like our onboarding in bi-monthly batches. So people can start with a cohort. We have senior execs running the sessions. We do value sessions. We do the history of Monzo so that people are joining and understand what they're becoming a part of. But then also once people are on board, making sure they stay connected. Like so much of what makes a company special is that informal connections and conversations and community. That's how the best ideas flourish. That's been a challenge in the pandemic, I think, for all companies, but one that we've focused on. And there you have to create, you have to be intentional about creating community. So we have a senior leadership team that we've created to be able to ensure that everybody knows each other and they're creating the community and having the dialogue. Things like all hands play an even more important role. So you're getting presentations from all levels and parts of the organization and Ask Me Anything with a broad range of execs, creating community space on Slack. We spend a lot of time thinking about culture because I think that is the thing that it was always at risk as you move into scale.
And presumably an advantage being able to do that from the ground up and start up rather than, again, the incumbent challenge of how do you manage that?
Yeah, I think building a culture is always easier than transforming a culture for sure.
Yeah. And Luvleen, are you back in the office now? How are you going to manage that? And how have you managed the pandemic and just trying to do exactly that, keep the team in startup scale-up phase at such a crucial time for you?
Yeah, well, I pride ourselves that we are, a digital bank. And so our ethos is digital. And so, when the pandemic hit, I feel that we were very well positioned to be able to handle things. It's difficult as it was for everyone to adapt overnight. But it just showed that we were digital savvy in all regards, and remote work was really no different. As we're thinking about going back, we are doing customer survey, employee surveys. We're trying to understand where's the employee's heads at. I mean, even looking at women, they called it the she session, right? And a lot of kids now at home and having to help them. It's just a different world now that people are adapting to. They've also gotten used to the flexibility of being at home and having, more family interactions as well. But people are also missing the work aspect of things, the collaboration, the innovation. And so where we're starting is really asking our employees where they stand, how do they feel? And at the end of the day, what's likely to happen is a hybrid model, a flexible model, where we're not going to require people to come in, but really look at their individual use cases. And number two is, certain number of times a week so that you do have that benefit of the in-person collaboration, innovation, relationship building, etc. But also don't take away the autonomy, frankly, that people are learning to really appreciate.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's something that's really interesting, watching how the media is portraying this as well. I mean, just this morning I was reading about investment banks and how they're bringing people in, and even if they're not coming in at the beginning in hybrid, they think they will come in because of fear of missing out. But I wonder if this is where we're going to see the split, and perhaps a great opportunity for employee retention and employee acquisition to be able to get that flexibility. I presume that is the same for you at Monzo.
Yeah, we were actually hybrid before the pandemic hit.
Yep.
So it's not like a massive transformation post-pandemic. And we, like Luvleen talked about, we talked to our teams and they kind of expressed their views, and most of them wanted a hybrid model. And so our offices are open. We have about 25% of people back now on a couple of days a week. I think it's really important to define the role of the workplace. Like what do those in-office days mean, and what are they for teams and for collaboration and for connection, and creating community outside of your immediate sphere of work and focus. But I also think it's really, the most important thing is focusing on how you stay inclusive. And so we're actually very pragmatic. We give people a lot of tips and tricks for, like, when, for example, when you have hybrid meetings and you have some people on a screen and some people in the room, how do you make sure that feels seamless and everybody has a voice? One of the wonderful things about the pandemic that we know across the world, not just at Monzo, is that underrepresented minorities, people that may have been, some women, people that may have felt more excluded, felt more included in that time. You know, the boxes on the screen were the ultimate democratization of conversations. And so none of us want to lose that. That's the piece that we're trying to make sure we keep as we return to the office and have more in-person interactions. And that's something that we're spending a lot of the time focused on. Yeah,
absolutely. Although I think anyone who was homeschooling for a few months is probably quite glad if we don't at least return to that. Let's talk about growth and staying ahead. You touched on it, Sujata.
I think there's something about the office being a perk, right?
Yeah, maybe, yes. I think I could definitely say that at the moment. So growth of neobanks, is innovation enough to sustain that growth? And as in, we know we know the neobanks can innovate quickly. We know they can change, and we know they can respond to customers. But is that going to be enough to continue to be the challengers? Luvleen, perhaps you can talk about sort of the future and life post listing.
Yeah, I mean, I think innovation is key, but it's definitely not enough. I think, firstly, technology and experiences become commoditized after a bit, and you have to, almost everyone can replicate what you have after a certain point, and you have to just keep innovating, and it's a never-ending sort of thing. So, firstly, technology can be commoditized, and so I don't think innovation is the final end-all, be-all. Secondly, I think that scale is really important. And when you see the Chimes of the world, et cetera, and the types, and Monzo probably too, the amount of funding that some challenger banks get and the amount that they can spend on marketing. So suppose Chime spends 500 million to $1 billion on marketing next year. That's great. And for the category, it brings awareness to the category, but the CAC becomes unsustainable, like for others. And so no matter how good your product is, no matter how great the innovation is, you kind of get, priced out after a certain point. So I think it's really important for us to look at customer acquisition strategy again. And that's what we've focused our. So can we create a sustainable, profitable company that can live on, for a sustainable amount of time and not have to rely on an unending pool of VC-backed capital? And so I think that innovation is very important, but it's not enough. I think there will be consolidation within the whole FinTech challenger bank space, because scale will win at the end. And if you can combine Monzo's 5 million with our 2 million, et cetera, that's where you're going to see things happening. And that's how we're going to be able to remain competitive as things progress.
Great, thank you. Sujata, consolidation, collaboration, partnerships, what's your take, and where does Monzo grow next?
Yeah, I don't think so much about consolidation. I think that could happen. I also think partnerships most certainly will happen. I think if you are defining your space as being, the financial control center of your customers' lives, and you want to be able to be nimble and be able to bring choice and curation to your customers, then it would be a bit silly to assume that a mothership that manufactures and produces all is the single model forward. So I think partnerships is absolutely part of the future.
It's been very interesting having lived through the tech days at the end of the 90s, and we saw so much fragmentation, so many new products and services, and inevitable that consolidation of partnerships comes after it, and it's going to be fascinating to watch these next 10 years. So let's talk about that. Obviously said the CogX conference is about getting the next 10 years right. And I know both of you talk so eloquently on inclusion, financial well-being, and just making your services so much easier to use. What does that landscape look like in 2030? Perhaps I'll come to Luvleen first.
Yeah, I think that there are certain themes that many of us have been seeing emerging that will become even stronger with time. Whether that is, the place that we're in, which is banking as a service, which is this idea you mentioned, Charlotte, financial inclusion. I think everyone deserves to have access to financial services, and whether it's an employer, whether it's a company, whether it's a government entity, we should be able to go to any institution that we engage with daily to be able to get access to financial services, not just going to our community bank. Banks might still be the back end infrastructure behind all of that, but we should be able to get customers access. And every employer, every company, every government entity should be able to offer banking solutions. And so I think banking as a service and enabling, especially non-banks, to be able to leverage the entrenched customer bases that they have access to be able to offer really compelling, very helpful financial services. And also at the same time, they benefit because they're building loyalty, they're building trust, they're creating differentiation, they're maybe creating more integrated, seamless experiences for their customers by integrating this, etc. So I think we're going to see a lot more of banking as a service, which has, elements of embedded finance as well. So people talk a lot about embedded finance and creating more integrated experiences for consumers. While these companies don't have to become a full-fledged bank, but maybe they're going to take aspects of it that really make the payment experience, for example, a lot easier, etc. In Europe or in the UK, Sujata can speak better than me, but I think open banking has been there, and talking about it for years. But I consider Plaid in that aspect where, to be able to get access to your financial information, to help speed up your payments, to help with the underwriting process of, to be able to help you manage your money by, being able to leverage all the aggregation of your banking, information, etc., will be another big theme. I think that cash will become, much less. We're seeing the emergence of digital payments. You're seeing the origination of digital currencies. Now 1 in every 5 Americans owns Bitcoin, right? That wasn't the case a year and a half ago. And so I think digital payments, digital currencies, another theme that we're just seeing the beginning of.
Yeah, I didn't realize it had got to that high number. It's incredible.
Yes, yeah.
And Sujata, the same for you, because I know that obviously you have a very user-friendly experience at Monzo. How much can that help in financial education?
Oh, I think it's hugely helpful in financial education. When you think about it, I think we've already, maybe I'm biased, but I think the challengers, not just Monzo, kind of already redefined financial services and turned the model on its head and changed the way people feel about their banks. And you see that more than half of our users are weekly active. So they're engaging in meaningful ways with us on a daily, weekly basis. And I think that's because we focused on making money and the relationship with it accessible, relevant, and even fun. So things like, making saving fun, the tools like IFTTT. You can automatically set money aside, for example, if it's raining or on the odd warm day in the UK, which we're experiencing right now, Charlotte. We've seen people, 80 million pounds saved in our customer group with roundups last year with a really simple tool which makes saving fun. They're engaging with us on social media about their money. We hear from customers that have neurodiversity issues and feel that the way that we've served up their money and made it accessible has actually finally allowed them to get control over their finances. So there's a lot of ways to be able to be inclusive. And I think, some of the things that we do around financial education, we avoid all jargon. So, we're known, we have a tone of voice manifesto. If you go on our website, you'll find it. We're keeping things in simple language, focusing on transparency. We're entirely focused on removing barriers to understanding and barriers to accessibility. I think my marketing team is one of the only ones that has a group of writers and a vulnerable customer specialist who focuses on everything from communicating with clarity, but to how to navigate the app, for example, if you're visually impaired or neurodiverse. And then, of course, there's a ton of financial education that you can do. And the key is to go where your customers are. So we have a whole series on TikTok, for example, helping to educate younger customers on how they can, learn more about their finances. So I think, our role is to empower a more kind of diverse universe to have a better relationship with their money.
Yeah, absolutely. And Luvleen, do you think as we move forward over the next few years, are we going to see a more greener, more sustainable financial services? And are we going to therefore see more trust coming back into banking Because obviously we saw that so badly affected post-financial crisis.
Well, what's interesting is, people have great relationships with other companies that they have relationships with. And so, for example, with TMobile Money, which we launched with T-Mobile, it might be people, when we first launched that relationship, they were like scratching their head. They're like, it sounds good, Luvleen, but good luck. It was kind of like what I felt was, but people respect and love, like people hate most of their carriers, but T-Mobile has created a differentiation. And Sujata was talking about NPS, and in a really, shitty sort of wireless experience, most people hate it. T-Mobile stands out, and that's a trusted, respected brand within wireless. And it's crazy, in their own surveys where they offer like free go-in flight, free Netflix. But for those that are aware of the T-Mobile Money account, they view the T-Mobile Money account as more meaningful, more appealing than the free go-in flight and the free Netflix. And so I think this idea of being able to leverage where there's already trust in relationships and being able to enable those companies, as I said before, to offer financial services is a way, forward. And there's so much opportunity and growth in there still.
And I feel I have to ask this question, one, because it's so rare that I get to moderate two women, senior level CEO, COO, running fintechs, but also because of Olga, who introduced us. So you're talking about women and their attitude to money. Do you think challenger banks is going to help level that playing field for more diversity as well and the socioeconomic change? Because we've obviously seen such a difference between a woman's attitude to money versus a man. And, I'd be interested in the role that challenger banks can play on that.
Sorry, we're going to go ahead, Sujata. Well, it's just amazing looking at our customer base. So in our student demographic, 2/3 of our customers today are women, and 2/3 of them are minorities. And about close to half of the women that we serve are actually single women, because it's just a demographic that we've ended up attracting. So I'm very proud that offering that, firstly, the distribution channel with which we were able to touch and bring awareness to this demographic, that there's a better banking option. So today, through the college universities that we have relationships with, about half of them are 2-year community colleges. And that's how I think that we were able to really touch these sort of more unbanked populations, underserved populations, through that relationship with the colleges and the universities. But I definitely feel, just looking at our customer base and the offering that we have, the number of women that we serve today, it's just incredible. So I do think that there's a huge opportunity to be able to, with technology, serve all underserved demographics, not just women.
Yeah, I really echo that. I think we don't have, we try to be inclusive, so we don't put the gender lens on our customers. It is a very balanced population, but we don't lead with that. And I think it's really about being inclusive across all underrepresented groups or people that are feeling excluded from their ability to manage their financials. But one thing that I will point to that has been really interesting is, we saw in the pandemic, spousal abuse really skyrocketed, and people suffering, which does disproportionately impact women, suffering in terms of control of their finances. And, at Monzo, we had a share with us feature in our app where you can confidentially notify us if you are a victim of spousal abuse, and we can find a way to be able to help you gain access to your money and protect you. And things like that, I think, are really critical to be able to make sure that you can address all of the needs of the populations out there.
That's really cool. And we also just announced last week that we partnered with MasterCard and MasterCard True Name. I think, Monzo, you guys have done that as well. So we are one of the first. And that, Charlotte, if you're not familiar with it, gives the opportunity for those individuals that identify with a certain name, and it might not be their legal name, but to be able to represent who they truly are on their card. And we've partnered with MasterCard, and so has Sujata at Monzo, to be able to offer that and create even more inclusivity, you could say, through our brands.
That's fantastic. I mean, I just, I get inspired by listening to you both, and I sort of feel I know the space, and then I listen to some more. Let's turn to a few questions here that I've got coming in. And in fact, we touched on open banking. So we've got a question. I'd love to hear the panel's views on the current state of open banking, and to what extent is it fulfilling its potential? Probably more of a question for you, Sujata.
Yeah, I think open banking is just getting started. I think it's a brilliant innovation, and there's so much promise to it. I think right to date, it's sort of the tools are really focused on financial visibility or access to credit. And certainly from an incumbent perspective, open banking is not difficult, but it gets kind of relegated in many companies to the compliance bucket versus the innovation or customer-centric bucket. And that is a challenge to be able to fulfill the promise of open banking. I think longer term, open finance, which will be the layer of of services and tools that are built on top of that really start to improve financial control, is really the promise of open banking. And I think we're just getting started there. Customers can get wider visibility to things like pensions, investments, mortgages, savings. I think they're going to expect curation and being able to create customized services for customers. And it allows much more innovation, allows fintechs to build once for many when you have that layer. So there's just so much more to come, and I think it's really early days.
Yeah. And Luvleen, do you think you're going to see something similar in the US?
Yeah, absolutely. As I said before, when you asked me sort of themes of the future, I think open banking, embedded finance, and banking as a service, and there's overlapping components of all of them, but they're also distinct, but they sort of help customers have a more integrated experience to be able to access parts of financial services with the different brands that they interact with to make that experience more seamless. And I think we're going to see more and more of that.
Great. Another question here is saying traditional banks will react to competition from neobanks by providing non-banking services, for example, financial advisory for SMEs. Interested in both of you responding on that and what you're doing on that front. Let's start with you, Luvleen.
So we had our first earnings call 2 weeks ago, and I talked about really our 5-pillar strategy. And so we're going to have banking, lending, which we already have, and we're moving into advice, investing, and crypto. And so to the point that we've talked about before, there's a build, there's a buy, there's a partner, conversation to be had there. And we're really analyzing where does it make sense for us to really build this innovation versus partner versus now we have public currency and doing M&A. But, advisory investing is really important. And I think that being able to combine it with some of the things Sujata has done about rounding up, maybe, an acorns model where you're rounding up, but then you're investing it and sort of combining some of these elements together could be really helpful to the consumer. And we're definitely investing in, all of the above.
Yeah, and I think from our end, that answer is pretty comprehensive and not so different. What I would say is that in the very near term, we have a lot of runway on our 3 main products, which are subscription products from a retail banking perspective, lending, responsible lending, and also our business banking business, which is just getting started. So we have a lot of just nascent businesses that have only just scratched the tip of the iceberg. So watch the space. But if you're trying to be the financial control center of your customers' world, you can absolutely see the adjacencies that will be part of the long-term roadmap.
Great. And perhaps just a final question from me before we wrap up. Magic wands, what would you like to fix? Anything you'd like, if you were starting a new fintech, what would it be? Lovely.
I always think
I'm not going to hold you to this for the next few years.
Yeah, no, I feel like there's so much innovation we can do within our own company, and so I have put no ceiling to it. But it's something that I know that you could build a whole company on is just cybersecurity. As you sort of look at the way we're accelerating digitization and the beauty of that, and really creating better customer experiences. But I do think that there's going to be a continued sort of fear and concern about making sure that we combat fraudsters. And I think that more and more companies that continue to invest and build businesses out of protecting consumers from this, it's going to be very important and I think lucrative.
Great, thank you. And Sujata.
I think the magic wand I would love to wave is, how these companies get built is no mystery. It's, incredible talent, focused on customers and solving real problems. And that incredible talent in all of our companies has had an incredibly hard year. They've really struggled over the course of this pandemic. And there has, a lot of people have struggled with resilience, whether it's going on with their personal lives or, more broadly in the world. So if I could wave my magic wand, I would give everybody, the energy boost and the feeling of, a new normal, and allow them to kind of move beyond this really difficult time in the world to be able to get back to what they love.
Great, thank you. And we had one final question of how do people get in touch with you if they want to speak to you? Are you both on LinkedIn? I presume you are.
Yeah.
Okay, right, there
Yep.
you are. That's it. That's the final question. Well, that's a whistle-stop tour around what the next 10 years in challenger neobanks looks like. I think we're all inspired, and I think you've given us all confidence that you will definitely be staying ahead of the incumbents. Luvleen, Sidhu, BM Technologies, Sujata, Bhatia, Monzo, thank you so much for your time today. And I am now going to hand back to Olga to continue on the sessions. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody, and thank you so much, Charlotte. Hey, how wonderful in all of this day, talking about technology and innovation, the one thing that really stuck with me from this panel was the human side of things. I think it was said that almost everyone can replicate what you have in terms of technology, but the innovation comes from the people. And I absolutely love that thought, that we don't forget about the humans, that we serve as customers, but that also make it happen inside the company.